Thanks for tuning in. You've reached Open Door, and I'm Bill Effler, and I think most of you already know that. I'm wearing my flannel today, so it's very clear that we are still in winter. I was really hoping for a Hawaiian shirt today, but I think we're still a ways off for that. Today we have an interesting show, at least from my perspective. I am really committed to bringing new and different and relevant things to the table. And today is a podcast that's dedicated to talking about the financial landscape of the United States, where we're at, what one financial investor sees as what is going on. He gets very practical at the very end, where he talks about things to avoid and things to consider in order to be successful. And my friend his name is Shane Unsworth. He was a new student of mine at Lee University back in 2000. So he has some water under the bridge now. He's been a very successful financial planner. He'll talk about that later today. But I think this is not as dry as you would think it to be. So if you're driving in the car, you're not going to have to pull over and say, I need to really listen to this. I just think it's just straight up good information. Last thing I just want to say is in the weeks to come, I'm going to be dealing with some issues that are important to me. I mean, they're all important to me, but some of you know that a couple weeks ago, my wife broke her shin bone. We called the tibia. So we are in a whole new orientation of life regarding that. It's going to be a long process for her healing. And because of that, I'm going to be doing a podcast specifically on patience. It's something that both she and I have both needed to learn in this season. I'm going to follow that up with another podcast on disappointment with God. You cannot be a counselor for very long and not know that some people really feel let down by God, and I want to address that as well. And also, I'm going to be doing an interview with a person that I've spent some time with now on church hurt. This is a common reality in our culture today. It continues to be epidemic. This isn't something that just took place, in yesteryear, but we see it sadly today as well. So I'm going to be addressing church hurt in an interview. So just like all of the shows, if you find one to be interesting or meaningful that you think a friend would appreciate, I want to encourage you to share that and to tell others. And I am trying to get some traction on this show, and I'm already encouraged about the early results. So again, thanks for joining me today on Open Door, and enjoy this interview with a former student of mine, now a financial planner and analyst. His name is Shane Unsworth. God bless you. Well, Shane, thanks for being with me today.
It's great to be here.
And you're saying, I've never done a podcast before. Well,
I have not.
Well, this is kind of a new environment, relatively new environment for me, but I've been having a fun time doing this. I am really committed to addressing all areas of life. I mean, a lot of people, when they think about, well, he's been a pastor and an educator and a counselor, and but I like to get out of the box, and I know how to get back in the box if I need to. But today, I specifically invited you to come because I know what you do professionally. Right. And so our audience does not know who you are or what you do, what gets you in and out of trouble. Yeah. We'll ask your wife that later.
Absolutely.
At another time.
She'll be able to comment on that one.
So tell the audience, say, who is Shane Unsworth? Where are you from? A little bit of your own history and what's brought you to 2024 as far as your profession goes.
Yeah. So my name is Shane Unsworth. I am originally from Rome, Georgia. and I grew up in Rome until I was 17 years old, and then I moved to Cleveland, Tennessee to go to Lee University, and that's where I had you as a professor.
And what year was that?
That was in 2000.
Oh, I really owe you an apology then.
Yeah, no, it's okay. But I went to Lee University, and I have a degree in Christian ministries with a youth emphasis. That's what I was planning on doing from the time that I started at Lee up until about my junior year. Mm-hmm. And then my junior year, my wife's best friend was graduating, and her dad was a financial advisor. I didn't know what that was, but he took an interest in me at his daughter's graduation dinner, and he talked to me for about 2 hours there.
Oh my.
And he was telling me all about this profession, and I was nodding and smiling, but I had no idea what he was talking about. So I had to go home and Google it. Uh-huh. And so I Googled it and started learning a little bit more about it, but he was telling me he thought that I would do a fantastic at that. And that was kind of where it started, where I felt the Lord guiding me in a different direction other than youth ministry.
And just a real quick pause. Mm-hmm. You had no background, no real inclination about finances, financial planning, investing.
No, none.
The New York Stock Exchange.
None.
So they don't talk about that in Rome, Georgia.
No, they do talk about it. It's just that it just never really interested me that much. And
I just want to pause here and just make an observation that it's entirely possible that that we can get surprised in life, and I think that those surprises also get confirmation.
Sure.
And obviously you have that as well. So, I'm sure that there's viewers here that think that their life is buttoned up and you know where you're going and what you're doing, or maybe, you're in later years, as am I, and I probably couldn't consider that, but I'm saying, I think Scripture's clear. Behold, I'm doing a new thing. Do you perceive it not?
Yeah.
So I'm excited and nervous about what you share here. Having no background, and then all of a sudden you find yourself getting this surprise.
Right. Yeah. No. So, like I said, I had to go home and Google it to try to figure out what it was, but it kept staying in the back of my mind. Even when I graduated college, I was selling cell phones at the Bradley Square Mall in Cleveland, Tennessee, and I took a job at the Sprint store at Hamilton Place Mall in Chattanooga.
Sure.
And I met a gentleman that was in this industry, and he talked to me about it. And one of the things that kind of that was made me nervous about it is that this industry, not many people make it in there. I would probably say that of every 100 people, maybe 5 to 10 make it in this business.
Really?
Yeah. And
that's brutal.
It is. And I started out with a company called A.G. Edwards and Sons, and they had a 5-year program that wasn't as cutthroat as everything else. And so I decided to try it. I wasn't married at the time, and I was just like, you know what? I'm going to give this a go and see what happens. I was dating my wife, my now wife, but I wasn't married at the time. But yeah, I started out, didn't really know anybody in Chattanooga, and started building a business for about 4 years at A.G. Edwards. And then UBS Financial Services contacted me about coming over and partnering up with another advisor.
Before you tell that story, just real briefly, how do you start with nothing and build a business?
It's challenging. You've got to put your shame behind you and be willing to talk to anybody and everybody. I even joked, and I didn't do this, but I even joked at my wedding. When we got married, I was like, you know what? There's going to be 300 or 400 people here. I might as well give a pitch, at the reception.
Serious?
And, yeah, my wife didn't want that at all. I don't blame her, but that's kind of what you have to do. You kind of have to put your shame aside and really step out of your comfort zone and do that.
Is that what that means to you, putting your shame aside?
Because I get ashamed. You feel kind of ashamed when you're doing something out of your comfort zone, and so that's the way that I describe that in a way.
And so, did your current employer, now several years ago, did they solicit you?
No, I knew somebody that worked there, and he was telling me that it may be a great idea for me to try that. And the gentleman that I talked to when I was back in college, I didn't know it at the time, but there's a investment firm called Edward Jones.
Yes.
And he was the number 3 person in the country at one time there. So he was a really big deal. And he wrote me a letter of recommendation. He tried to get me to come up to Chicago and work with him, and I just did not feel right about doing that. I didn't feel that's where I was supposed to be. But yeah, he wrote me a letter of recommendation, and I was able to get hired.
And you've been with them for how long?
Well, I was with A.G. Edwards for 4 years, and then UBS recruited me, and I partnered up with my current partner now, and I've been with UBS since May of 2011. And so I'm coming up on, I guess that's 13 years.
Wow. And so I'm going to ask you to brag on yourself for
Sure.
just a minute and tell the audience about you and Forbes magazine.
Okay. Yeah. So in 2018, I was contacted by an organization working with Forbes called Shook Research. And they were working with Forbes, and they work in conjunction with it. So they do all the data gathering and everything for the rankings, and then Forbes issues the rankings out under their name. And so it is officially Forbes rankings, but Shook just does all the research for it. So I was contacted, and they were asking if they could come and interview me. And I was like, okay, that's fine. Sure, whatever, we'll do it. And so they started interviewing me, asking me about what I do, what some of my performance numbers have been, some different avenues, and just really kind of an extensive interview. And then I was named as one of America's top next generation wealth advisors. I was one of 1,000 people that was named that across America for 2018. And then in 2023, my team was ranked as one of the best in state wealth management teams for Tennessee by Forbes. And then we were ranked again this year. And so we basically have back-to-back rankings. And so unlike the Georgia Bulldogs, I'm hoping to go for a three-peat. We'll see.
That's very good.
That's an inside joke because I'm a big dog fan.
Yeah, and he knows that I'm not. So if you had to identify one or two markers on why you are successful professionally, we're going to talk about economics in a minute, but as far as personal success, you talked about putting shame aside, willing to do a lot of the hard work.
Right.
But what would you say to a younger person, or even somebody who's thinking, I might be needing to think about a career change?
Yeah. I would say somebody told me one time when I was early in the business, they said, Shane, people don't care how much you know until they know how much you care about them. And I would say in this situation, one of the things that's helped me along the way is really caring about people. I know that may sound, just kind of pie in the sky type stuff, but it really is people want to know that they have an advocate. And that's what I do in the industry. For example, I had a client whose husband passed away. She depended on him a lot. And she was engaging me about she wanted to buy a car. And I told her, I was like, hey, anything you need, if you need me to get on the phone with contractors, if you're trying to do something, I'll be your advocate. And so she went to go buy a car. And she called me when she was in the car. She was going back to her house to get a checkbook to write a check for the car. And I asked her what it was and how much it was. And she told me, and I was like, you need to take that car back. And she was like, why? I was like, because they're ripping you off. And I told her why, and I provided some evidence of it. And so then the next day I went up to Honda of Cleveland and negotiated a car for her. On my day off, took my daughter with me, but I do that to say is that it's really just going above and beyond and being willing to go the extra mile and taking the little bit of extra time that it takes to do that.
You bet. So let's talk about today's economic landscape. and I'll be real specific.
Sure.
What have you seen economically just in the last 3 months? Before the show started, we talked about that the market took a real hit earlier in the week, 700 points, and you quickly countered back and said, and it's almost all back.
Yeah.
And so I think it would be interesting for people to get your bird's eye view on the economy, specifically in the last 3 months. And then a follow-up to that is, this is an election year, and what should voters be thinking about as they cast their vote for president? And I want to be clear, this is not a political show at all. I'm not turning it into that. But the reality is for literally for my entire generation, we've had who's ever been in the office not been willing to cut the bleeding. So
Yeah.
So go for it.
No, over the last 3 months has been really interesting. A lot of what the overall stock market in general is trading on is, what is the Federal Reserve's going to do? And is the Federal Reserve going to raise interest rates, or are they going to lower interest rates? And if I could just for a minute take that, what the reason that we have a lot of inflation right now is because of spending that happened in 2020 and 2021. So what the federal government did and the Federal Reserves is that to send out stimuluses and to prop up some of these businesses with the Paycheck Protection Act and the PPP and some different areas like that, the government had to borrow money to do that. Where did they go? They went to the Federal Reserves. Contrary to popular belief, the Federal Reserve does not give away money. They actually loan money out. And so during 2020, when the economy was shutting down, the Federal Reserves opened up and started loaning to not only the federal government, but companies and municipalities. And the way that they do that is they do create money to loan out. And so they loan this money out to the different companies, municipalities, and federal government, and they are going to pay that money back at some point. And so the reason that we have inflation is because we spent close to $9 trillion between 2020 and 2021. And if you create that, which is what the Federal Reserve did, is it diminishes the value of your dollar. Therefore, eggs, I think at one point went up to $7 a dozen. And so things got more expensive. So what the Federal Reserve started doing in 2022 was lowering interest rates because the economy was moving. The economy was humming, and it still is, because there was a lot of money that was in the economy from what the Federal Reserves had loaned out. And so in 2022, the Federal Reserve started lowering interest rates and also started doing quantitative tightening. And what that is that when that money gets paid back, they destroy it. They take it out of circulation. And so with what's happening with the stock market is really directly related to what the feds are doing. The feds raised really aggressively in 2022 and started in 2022 really and went into 2023. But now it's just the metric of, hey, when are the feds going to start lowering interest rates? And that's what happened in October of this year. The bond market went nuts. The bond yields went very, very high, and they started coming down because of comments made by Chairman Powell.
So do you think that purchasing bonds is a good thing?
Right now, it's not a bad idea. It's not a bad idea to look at that if you're looking at a conservative rate of return. The 10-year Treasury, as of yesterday, was a little over 4.2%, which in 2020, it was at about 0.5%. The 10-year Treasury rate. So yeah, I think bonds are something to really look at. But when the Fed started talking about lowering interest rates, that's when the market really took off. And then bond yields came down. But also artificial intelligence has really started coming on the forefront more so than it ever has. Artificial intelligence has been around for many, many years.
So tell people what your understanding of artificial intelligence is as it pertains to finances, or how it relates to finances.
Really, the way the artificial intelligence is going to relate to finances is, are you investing in a company that's doing this? Because artificial intelligence is almost like us in learning but it's morally agnostic at the same way. So it's something that can learn. It's going to be data driven. So it's able to go out and get data throughout the internet and relay that information in split second decisions. But what that will do is that can potentially take away HR departments. It can potentially take away jobs where you would normally, for instance, if I've got a question that I don't know maybe about an IRA or retirement account, I call my IRA department. Well, now you could potentially have an AI software that could answer that question in real time for me because it scans the
And would it
internet.
be accurate?
Yes. Yeah. A lot of times it would be accurate.
Because when I think about the words artificial intelligence, I separate those. Artificial meaning
Right.
it's bogus, and intelligence. You would think somebody's cognitively, rationally,
Right.
thought things through. But if you put those things together,
Yeah.
you got this artificial orbiting thing that's contaminating our intelligence.
Right.
And I think this is the danger that uninformed investors have.
And that was something that last year, the artificial intelligence boom really kicked off at the end of 2022, and it carried over into last year. And that's where you see the stocks that people refer to as called the Magnificent Seven, which is Tesla, Microsoft, Alphabet, Amazon, NVIDIA, Meta, and Apple. All of them have AI components.
And you guys can rerun that because he spoke real fast. But tell them what is the Magnificent Seven? Name them.
Yeah.
And then why do you call them the Magnificent Seven?
The reason we call them the Magnificent Seven is, again, it's Tesla, NVIDIA, Microsoft, Meta, Alphabet, Apple, and Amazon. They were responsible. All seven of those stocks were up almost 108% combined last year. If you average their returns, they were up 108%.
So for those of you who are thinking about the stock market or getting involved in it, those seven would be a safe bet.
Well, that's debatable in some ways. I think that they are good bets. I think that they're good, in a sense. But you definitely want to consult with your own personal financial advisor or your financial situation to do that. But yes, those companies did go gangbusters last year, and they were the S&P 500, which is what people generally measure the stock market by, was up about 26%, and 60% of that return was from those seven stocks. 60% of the market's return last year was due to seven stocks. And what that does going forward into what you were talking about into 2024, it's looking like for the election and what we see upcoming is when you look at the divergence between the Magnificent Seven and the rest of the market and the economy, really those are the ones that's done incredibly well, but the rest of the 493 stocks in the S&P 500 have not done as well. And so the argument is, are they going to come down to earth a little bit, or are these going to rise up and meet them? And I'm kind of in the camp of that they're going to come back down to earth and then rise up. Then the other portions of the S&P 500 are going to come in line, and they're going to eventually come back to parity.
So the term that you're really talking about here is the word correction.
Yeah.
And
I would say a correction. I'm not calling for something real big, but we still do have some, getting into the 2024, we still have some challenges. Inflation is still high. The consumer pricing index numbers came out and ticked up this week. That's why we had the massive 700-point sell-off that you referred to, because that means that inflation is not coming down as quickly as what we wanted, and the market potentially thinks the Feds will keep interest rates where they are and not lower rates quicker.
So we have about 3 minutes left.
Sure.
And so you're going to have to think fast on this
I
one.
will.
And so what is a common mistake that an uninformed investor makes that you've seen? I'm sure you've heard people come into your office with horror stories saying that they had a financial planner and they did them bad. And so what is something that a common mistake that you've seen pretty frequently? And secondly, the correction on how do you stay out of financial trouble?
Yeah. I think that a common thing, Albert Einstein once said that the eighth wonder of the world is compounding interest. And the common mistake is not starting early enough, because there are,
What do you mean by that?
for instance, if you took an 18-year-old and an 18-year-old put $2,000 in a mutual fund that was averaging 12% per year from 18 to 26, put a total of $14,000 and stopped investing, and then started pulling that out at 65, they'd have well over $1 million if it continues.
Give those numbers
averaging.
one more time.
So if you, from the time you were 18 until you were 26, if you put $2,000 a year back into a mutual fund, and the mutual fund was averaging 12% per year over that 40 plus year period, you would have well over $1 million on just a $14,000 investment.
Particularly for the younger audience, I don't know what you do with those, but at 69, I'm kind of going, there's more sand in the bottom of my hourglass than what's on top. And so I think the encouragement here is that if you can just put some money away on a regular basis between the ages of 18 and 26 and in 40 and not touch it.
Right.
I mean, and in 40 years, quite frankly, this is going to sound really crass, but in 40 years, $1 million is not going to be worth what it is today.
No, it's not.
So
it's not. So I think that's a mistake that we see people that make in theirs. Just even though they have a small amount, small dollars turn into a lot of dollars down the road.
Did you hear that? Small dollars can turn into a lot of dollars. I just that's great. And so. So what is the caution or the corrective, to this?
The caution, I would say, is don't get there's an old saying, if you get too excited, you've already lost. And so what I mean by that is that, people get really excited about, artificial intelligence, cryptocurrency, things like this, and things that go up really quickly. Something that goes up really quickly can come back down.
Absolutely.
Don't necessarily get married to one type of investment, because ask people from Enron or GE, those types of companies. Enron and GE are not the same, but people that were heavily invested in those are not where they were 20 years ago or 30 years ago, especially with Enron. So I would say not get too excited about and not get too, I'm only going to do this or I'm only going to do that. Be open to other areas as far as investments and stocks, bonds. I mean, I've had people that say, no, I'm just going to invest in gold and that's it. Well, it's not necessarily the best option, in my opinion.
I'm thinking about my own mother and my parents and my grandparents were very wise and shrewd investors. And my mom thought, if she just continued to invest what she saw her parents doing, and it was really difficult. And this is a whole podcast in particular, but the older generation, my folks, let's say it's 69 to 85, we get enamored with stuff that we can't let go of. And so to romanticize a stock or a financial avenue and think that it's going to sustain for a lifetime, this is not necessarily the truth. My mom did come around, but it was not easy.
It takes a while.
So in 1 minute, if we had to put a capstone, a ribbon on, today's landscape and just the value of being able to talk to somebody like you, what word of caution or encouragement would you have our viewers here today about finances and the days that we're living in?
Yeah, I think financial planning is something that it can be easy, but it can also be hard at the same time. And I look at you because you're a professional counselor. And when I had some tragedy in my life, that's one of the things that I sought out was professional help because I'm in finance and not trained to do that. And I think don't be so apprehensive about working with somebody or seeking out help, because even it may cost you a little bit. It may cost you a little bit of money. But there are many, many statistics that talk about people that work with a financial advisor typically do better over the years and due to not having to make some of those mistakes that we mentioned earlier.
And I know, there's going to be viewers who are seeing this who have actually, sought a professional financial advisor and have not seen the return and they get frustrated.
Yeah.
And so I know I keep on running the clock out here, but what should somebody look for in getting solid financial counsel?
I would look for somebody that you trust. First off, you need to be able to trust the person that you're working with. You need to be able to talk to them, to open up, and they need to, and the person that is helping them needs to also not sugarcoat things, and you have to be honest about stuff. So I would think trust is really going to be the biggest deal, is to make sure that you trust the person. And if you don't trust them, there's really not a whole lot of reason to be working with them.
You really don't have anything.
Right.
Well, we've left a whole lot of information on the table here today, and maybe we'll come back and do round 2 on another time.
Sure.
But again, I'm so committed to bringing material that I think is helpful and practical. And I just want to say thanks for joining Open Door, and we'll see you in another couple of weeks.